Welcome to chapter 21. It's called Goodbye, Violet. This gum, Mr. Wonka went on, is my latest, my greatest, my most fascinating invention. It's a chewing gum meal. It's that tiny little strip of gum lying there. It's a whole 3-course meal all by itself. What sort of nonsense is this? Said one of the fathers. My dear sir, said Mr. Wonka, when I start selling this gum in the shops, it's going to change everything. It'll be the end of all kitchens and all cooking. There'll be no more marketing to do, no more buying of meat and groceries. There'll be no knives and forks at meal times, no plates, no washing up, no garbage, no mess. Just a little strip of Wonka's magic chewing gum, and that's all you'll ever need at breakfast and lunch and dinner. This piece of gum that I just made happens to be tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie, but you can have almost anything you want. What do you mean it's tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie? Said Violet Beauregarde. Well, if you start chewing it, said Mr. Wonka, then that's exactly what you'll get on the menu. It's absolutely amazing. You can actually feel the food going down your throat into your tummy, and you can taste it perfectly, and it fills you up. It satisfies you. It's terrific. That's impossible, said Veruca Salt. Just so long as it's gum, said Violet Beauregarde. Just so long as it's a piece of gum and I can chew it, then that's for me. And quickly she took her own world record-breaking piece of gum out of her mouth and stuck it behind her left ear. Come on, Mr. Wonka, she said. Hand over this magic gum of yours and we'll see if this thing works. Now, Violet, said Mrs. Beauregarde, her mother, don't let's do anything silly, Violet. I want the gum, Violet said obstinately. Who's so silly? I would rather you didn't take it, Mr. Wonka told her gently. You see, I haven't got it quite right yet. There are still 1 or 2 things. Oh, to heck with that, said Violet. And suddenly, before Mr. Wonka could stop her, she shot out her fat hand and grabbed the stick of gum out of the little drawer and popped it into her mouth. At once, her well-trained jaws started chewing away on it like a pair of tongs. Don't, said Mr. Wonka. Oh, it's fabulous, said Violet. It's tomato soup. It's hot, and it's creamy, and it's delicious. I can feel it running down my throat. No, stop, said Mr. Wonka. The gum isn't ready yet. It's not right. Of course it's right, said Violet. It's working beautifully. Oh, my, what lovely soup this is. Spit it out, said Mr. Wonka. It's changing now, said Violet, chewing and grinning both at the same time. The second course is coming up. It's roast beef. It's tender and juicy. Oh, boy, what a flavor. The baked potato is marvelous, too. Oh, it's got a crispy skin, and it's all filled with butter inside. Oh, but how interesting, Violet, said Mrs. Beauregarde. You are a clever girl. Keep on chewing, kiddo, said Mr. Beauregarde. Keep right on chewing, baby. This is a great day for the Beauregardes. Our little girl's the first person in the world to have a chewing gum meal. Everyone was watching Violet Beauregarde as she stood there chewing this extraordinary gum. Little Charlie Bucket was staring at her absolutely spellbound, watching her huge rubbery lips as they pressed and unpressed with the chewing, and Grandpa Joe stood beside him, gaping at the girl. Mr. Wonka was wringing his hands and saying, No, 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 it's not quite right. It isn't ready for eating. It isn't right. You mustn't do it. Oh, blueberry pie and ice cream, shouted Violet. Here it comes. Oh, my, it's perfect. It's beautiful. It's exactly as though I'm swallowing it. It's as though I'm chewing and swallowing great big spoonfuls of the most marvelous blueberry pie in the world. Good heavens, girl, shrieked Mrs. Beauregarde suddenly, staring at Violet. What's happening to your nose? Oh, be quiet, Mother, and let me finish, said Violet. It's turning blue, screamed Mrs. Beauregarde. Your nose is turning blue as a blueberry. Your mother's right, said Mr. Beauregarde. Your whole nose has gone purple. What do you mean, said Violet, still chewing away. Your cheeks, screamed Mrs. Beauregarde. They're turning blue as well. So is your chin. Your whole face is turning blue. Spit the gum out at once, ordered Mr. Beauregarde. Mercy, save us, yelled Mrs. Beauregarde. The girl's going blue and purple all over. Even her hair is changing color. Violet, you're turning violet, Violet. What is happening to you? I told you that I hadn't got it quite right, said Mr. Wonka, shaking his head sadly. I'll say you haven't, cried Mrs. Beauregarde. Just look at the girl now. Everyone was staring at Violet, and what a peculiar sight she was. Her face and her hands and her legs and her neck, in fact, the skin all over her body, as well as her great big mop of curly hair, had turned a brilliant purplish blue, the color of blueberry juice. It always goes wrong when it comes to the dessert, said Mr. Wonka. It's the blueberry pie that does it. I'll get it right in the end one day. You'll see. Violet, screamed Mrs. Beauregarde, you're starting to swell up. Oh, I feel sick, Violet said. You're swelling up, screamed Mrs. Beauregard again. Oh, I feel most peculiar, said Violet. I'm not surprised, said Mr. Beauregard. Great heavens, girl, screeched Miss Beauregard. You're blowing up like a balloon. No, like a blueberry, said Mr. Wonka. Call a doctor, shouted Mr. Beauregard. Oh, stick her with a pin, said one of the other fathers. Save her, cried Mrs. Beauregard, wringing her hands. But there was no saving her now. Her body was swelling up and changing shape at such a rate that within a minute it had turned to nothing less than an enormous round blue ball. Oh, a gigantic blueberry, in fact. And all that remained of Violet Beauregard herself was a little tiny pair of legs and a little tiny pair of arms sticking out of the great round fruit, with a little tiny head up on top. It always happens like that, said Mr. Wonka. I've tried it 20 times in the testing room on 20 different Oompa Loompas, and every one of them ends up like a blueberry. It's very annoying. I can't understand it. But I don't want a blueberry for a daughter, yelled Mrs. Beauregard. Put her back into what she was this instant. Mr. Wonka clicked his fingers, and 10 Oompa Loompas appeared immediately at his side. Roll Miss Beauregard into the boat, he said to them, and take her along to the juicing room at once. The juicing room, said Mrs. Beauregard. What are they going to do there? Oh, they're going to squeeze her, said Mr. Wonka. We got to squeeze all that juice out of her immediately. After that, we'll just have to see how she comes out. But don't you worry, my dear Mrs. Beauregard. We'll get her all repaired if it's the last thing we do. I am sorry about it all. I really am. Already the 10 Oompa Loompas were rolling the enormous blueberry across the floor of the inventing room towards the door that led to the chocolate river where the boat was waiting. Mr. and Mrs. Beauregard hurried after them. The rest of the party, including little Charlie Bucket and Grandpa Joe, stood absolutely still and watched them go. Listen, whispered Charlie. Listen, Grandpa, the Oompa Loompas in the boat outside are starting to sing. The voices, all 100 of them, came in singing together loud and clear into the room. Dear friends, we surely all agree there's almost nothing worse to see than some repulsive little bum who's always chewing gum. It's very near as bad as those who sit around and pick their nose. So please believe us when we say that chewing gum will never pay. This sticky habit's bound to end, the chewer to a sticky end. Did any of you ever know a person called Miss Bigelow? This dreadful woman saw no wrong in chewing all day long. She chewed while bathing in the tub. She chewed while dancing at her club. She chewed in church and on the bus. It really was quite ludicrous. And when she couldn't find her gum, she'd chew up the linoleum or anything else that happened near, a pair of boots, the postman's ear, or other people's underclothes. And once she chewed her boyfriend's nose. She went on chewing till at last her chewing muscles grew so vast that from her face, her giant chin, it stuck out like a violin. For years and years she chewed away, consuming 50 packs a day, until one summer's eve, alas, a horrid business came to pass. Miss Bigelow went late to bed. At half an hour she lay and read, chewing all the while like some great clockwork crocodile. At last she put her gum away upon a special little tray and settled back and went to sleep. She managed this by counting sheep. But now how strange, although she slept, those massive jaws of hers still kept on chewing all the night, even with nothing there to bite. They were, you see, in such a groove, they positively had to move, and very grim it was to hear in pitch darkness, loud and clear, this sleeping woman's great big trap, opening, shutting, snip, snap, snap, faster, chop, chop, chop. The noise went on, it wouldn't stop, until at last her jaws decided to pause and open extra wide, and then with the most tremendous chew, they bit the lady's tongue in two. Thereafter, just from chewing gum, Miss Bigelow was always dumb, and spent her life shut up in some disgusting sanatorium, and that is why we'll try so hard to save Miss Violet Beauregard from suffering an equal fate. She's still quite young, it's not too late, provided she survives the cure. We hope she does, but we can't be sure. Chapter 22 is tomorrow.